Welcome back to today's webinar, related to phrasal verbs. And moving on from the three different combinations, we're going to now look at a phrasal verb which has several different meanings. Now, that is perhaps where the difficulty lies as well. That's an added difficulty to a phrasal verb. You have the same phrasal verb meaning different things. Now some of the meanings are very easy to deduce and to understand, and others may be a little bit more difficult because obviously the combination means something completely different. Now, my advice is it's very important that when you start learning your phrasal verbs, it's interesting to buy a book which has a very graphic, a graphic design of that specific phrasal verb. By looking at a picture, you're able to understand the phrasal verb much easier, and it's perhaps easier for you for it to stick in your head. That's perhaps one of the keys of learning certain phrasal verbs. Now, what the example we're going to use today is take off. So let's look at take off here. Now, take off has several different meanings, obviously, according to the different contexts. Now, the very first meaning, it's a very simple meaning, very common meaning, which means take off means to remove. So it can be remove an item of clothing or remove a thing. Now here I've used the example of he took off his tie when he got home. Now that's a very common action. When you get home, you take off your tie after a long day's work. You take off your jacket. You may take off your hat. You take off your shoes. This is a very simple meaning of the phrasal verb to take off. Simple and easy to understand. So as you can see here from my picture, he's removing his tie. Let's move on to the second meaning of take off. Now, the second meaning, now you've probably heard this, those of you who travel a lot and are airports and what have you. Now, here to take off means to depart, means to leave the ground, to begin to fly, So in this example, I've used the plane takes off at 12:30. The plane departs at 12:30. So again, here you have obviously the phrasal verb which means to depart. Take off, depart. Let's look at the third meaning. Now here the thing may complicate itself, because to take off also means, depending on the context, to become popular, or successful. So do you think this book will take off? Now, the same way, do you think this song will take off? Do you think this company will take off? Do you think this will succeed, will become popular? In this case, we're talking about a book. So do you think a lot of people will read this book? So do you think this book will take off? And here you've got my friend there. She's reading the latest novel. Let's move on to the fourth meaning. Again, very different. Now to take off, to leave quickly. So the burglar took off before the police arrived. Now, there you've got my burglar who's been going into people's homes and getting away with it. So running away, getting away with the stuff that he's actually stolen. Now, so the burglar took off, ran away quickly, before the police arrived. Again, a different meaning of take off. And the last meaning, now here a different meaning of take off means not to work for a period of time. So I felt sick, so I took off a couple of days, or I took a couple of days off. You can actually say it together, or you can split it. So now whether we split it or not, it depends on whether it has an object, it needs an object or not, and we'll be looking at that further on in the webinar. Okay, so again, a very, very different meaning of take off. So to take time off work. Okay, so obviously here, these different meanings, okay, you need to try and learn them, but obviously always visualizing a particular scene or a particular picture in order for it to stick in your head, okay, or in your brain, okay? Right. Now, let's move on. Now, this is the next part, which is transitive and intransitive. Now, verbs in English can be divided into two main groups, transitive or intransitive, okay? Now, within that group of transitive and intransitive, they can be separable or inseparable, okay? So let's go on to what is a transitive verb. What does it mean to be a transitive verb? Okay, so this is where I was referring to it needs an object or not, right? Transitive verbs require an object to complete their meaning. So you're asking me, what does that mean? Okay, so, well, it means the following. If I said to you, I need, that is, I, the subject, and verb need. If I said to you, I need, you'll be going like, yes, okay, you need what? Okay, tell me what you need. Okay, so obviously that sentence is not complete. Okay, so I need an object after that verb in order to make the sentence complete. Okay, so in this case, I would either need, okay, a noun or a pronoun. Okay, in order for it to make it complete. The example that I've put here is, I need a holiday. Okay, or I need it. Now, it could be I need a holiday. You can see my holiday picture there and my cocktail. Okay, or I need it. I need a drink. I need a book. I need a house. I need a car. I need to go somewhere, etc. So it needs an object or it needs a pronoun, okay, in order for it to complete its meaning. And that is what we refer to as a transitive verb, okay? So, we're looking at transitive verbs. What about a transitive phrasal verb? Okay, so the same rule applies, okay, to transitive verbs, phrasal verbs. It also requires an object, okay? So if I'm going to use the phrasal verb look for, okay? Now, if I said to you, I'm looking for, and I stop, you'd be saying to me, yes, you're looking for what? Okay, you haven't finished it. It needs to be completed, okay? So as we need an object, okay, and or again, we need an object or a pronoun. Now, this is very common in my house, okay? I'm looking for my house keys. I'm constantly losing them. I'm always looking for my house keys, okay? That's just a problem I think all of us have, and this is my particular issue with my house keys, okay? So I'm looking for my house keys, okay? Phrasal verb, transitive. Moving on. Now, transitive verbs are separable, okay? That means they can be separated, okay? So most transitive verbs are separable. Okay, so for example, I've got here, he called up his boss to tell him he had overslept. Okay, so that's a very common situation. Okay, you've got to call up your boss because you've overslept. Okay, that means you've slept too much and you're late for work. Okay, so in this case, the object is the boss. Okay, so the other way of saying it is you can split it and you can say he called his boss up to tell him he had overslept. Okay, so that could be placed between the verb and the particle. You could put the object between the verb and the particle. So the object can come after the phrasal verb or between the verb and the particle, as I've explained there. Okay, moving on. Transitive verbs can also be inseparable. Okay, Now, so for example, in this example, I've got my little boy here. He's looking after his dog, okay? So can be inseparable too. So if I said, I'll look after him. Now, it's transitive because it still needs the object pronoun, in this case, him, okay? But you cannot say, I'll look him after. That just doesn't make any sense. So you would not be able to say that. Okay, that sentence would be incorrect, but it's still a transitive phrasal verb, and it still needs that object, and it still needs that object pronoun. Okay, but it cannot be split up. Now we're going to look at intransitive verbs. Okay, so an intransitive verb, okay, contrary to a transitive verb, cannot have a direct object, okay, after them. So, for example, I laughed, okay? So here we cannot have an object after the intransitive laugh. So, I laughed something is incorrect, okay? There you've got my little girl laughing, okay? The subject, i.e., the subject, the girl in this case, in the picture, is doing the action, okay? And nothing receives the action. She herself is doing the action, okay? It's not going from the subject to the object. It stays with herself, okay? She is laughing, okay? So an intransitive verb does not pass the action to the object. It stays with the subject, okay? Now, the same rule applies to intransitive phrasal verbs, okay? In this case, you cannot have an object after an intransitive phrasal verb, okay? Now, the example that I've used here is, my car broke down, okay, on my way to work. That's another thing that can happen, okay? So, if your car breaks down, literally, okay, it stops working, okay? So, my car stopped working on the way to work. You could say that, or you could use the phrasal verb break down. My car broke down on the way to work, okay? So an intransitive verb does not pass the action to an object, as in the intransitive verb, okay? Moving on. Now, intransitive verbs are inseparable, okay? So you cannot separate them. So in the previous example of my car broke down, okay, you could not say I broke car down. You would not be able to separate them, okay? And in this case, I've used the phrasal verb get up, okay? So again, I get up, they go together, okay? I get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, okay? Again, you cannot say I get at up 6. It just doesn't make any sense, okay? So again, this is another rule that you need to remember. They're inseparable, okay? And that's the end of this part. Thank you.